special debate. We have Icy, and like I always mess this up, but is it Dennis or is it Denise?
It is now DeniSid.
Okay, DenisSid. Gotcha. So we have DeniSid and Icy. For this debate, Icy has taken the position that overpopulation is worth being concerned about. DenisSid has taken the opposition. As always, when we base upon who concedes, we don't get a vocal concession. We'll put it to a voting poll in which you, the audience, can vote on who you think performed better overall in the debate. There will be light moderation for this debate and no time limit. Thank you both for debating. You can get started.
Okay, would you like to do opening statements?
My, I think we should talk about the clarification first because we know the debate proposition, but I asked you to clarify a bit more, and maybe we should make that more apparent what you mean by your debate proposition.
Yeah, that sounds good. So, I guess to read off what I wrote answering your question about clarification. In terms of personal decision making and on a societal level, we should be concerned about avoiding a state of affairs which could be characterized as overpopulation for the benefit of humanity and for the environment. So do you have any questions about that?
I think if you have like an opening statement, then uh, I would say go ahead with it, and I will just listen and see if I disagree with anything in that.
Yeah, so I guess I can just start by kind of laying out or defining some terms. So by overpopulation, I mean effectively, too many people. Well, too many people for what? So when, more specifically, when population exceeds carrying capacity. So then carrying capacity, I think, is going to be a lot of what we are going to end up talking about. Um, so I would define carrying capacity as the number of organisms that can survive in an environment or thrive in an environment. There's sort of overlapping definitions there, and we can parse that out. So carrying capacity is, of course, linked to scarcity, in that if resources are scarce, the carrying capacity will decrease. So then my definition of scarcity is the lack of sufficient resources or lack of access to resources that would otherwise be available under some other circumstances. Merriam-Webster defines scarcity as deficient in quantity or number compared with the demand, not plentiful or abundant. So what I can say about carrying capacity is that there is no hard threshold. It's kind of a fuzzy line. I would cite like a Sorites paradox here that you can't necessarily define the point at which a pond becomes a lake, um, but we can tell the difference between the two. So a distinction can be made between raw carrying capacity and effective carrying capacity, where raw carrying capacity is just how many resources are needed and how many resources exist. Then you just multiply and you see how many people can you have. Effective carrying capacity, on the other hand, takes into account any extenuating or magnifying circumstances for scarcity. So there are all kinds of factors that I'm sure we'll end up talking about, um, which can be in those extenuating factors. Um, so do you have any questions about some like those concepts I just laid out?
I think I more or less understand the concepts. My question would be, do you think that we should, the people who are living now, should be concerned about a future that could be 100 years away from now?
Yes, I think necessarily the people alive now would need to be concerned with that because um, the choices that people alive now make is what's going to determine the circumstances 100 years in the future. Now, whether people should be concerned about circumstances after their death, I think is another question. But taking for granted that, you want the world to be a better place, I think, then this is definitely something that you should consider.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that if you have no concern for life or humanity beyond your own lifetime, then there would be not much concern about what happens when you die. You pretty much said that already. So if I'm, for example, I might be a person who is alive today, I would not have any concern for what happens in 100 years, supposing at least that I don't live to 130 or something like that.
Yeah. So I can understand that because, what you're motivated to do is improve your own experience, however you can, and those you care about, etc. And if you're dead, then you can't really have an experience anymore, right? So why should you care about improving it? Well, I think that, just as you exist now, there were people that existed before you, whose decisions impacted the world you live in today, and you would want them to care about the decisions they're making that affected you. So just the same, you should care about the decisions that you make that affect people that live in the future.
Yeah, I haven't even thought about if I want people in the past to have cared for my future. Sometimes I feel like they didn't care, which is why we are having things like climate change and maybe some other issues.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. So
if I think
sorry.
about it, I am all right with the current state of the world. Not so much that I would feel like I have this obligation to provide a future for other people in 100 years from now or whatever the time span might be.
Hmm. Yeah. So I mean, I think that we can conceive of many different ways that the world could be, if circumstances were different. Um, different possible worlds in the present time. And I think that you would agree that there are some possible worlds that we would prefer over other ones, and very likely over the one that we live in. That there are decisions that people could have made in the past that would have led to a better present. And so then I would hope that you would agree that um, we'd want people in the past to have made better decisions. Like if it were possible to convince people in the past to make better decisions, maybe that's something we would want to do.
In some sense, you kind of want some mistakes to happen, and it has, at least for me, provided a very interesting timeline. And maybe we actually need some kind of existential crisis in our lifetime, like if there were no climate change or well, there's no overpopulation by your definition right now, at least. That will be when we can't really produce more because of the lack of resources. But I think that this kind of an environment gives me something, whereas a perfect environment would not give me as interesting a life or as much potential to actually make some kind of progress in, I guess, the world view that I have or my character. Do you think that if life were uh, basically perfect, you would prefer that over some difficulty?
So I can appreciate the value of adversity that you're citing. And I don't know that it's possible to achieve perfection through people's choices such that we would not be dealing with any adversity. Um, I think that there are, major mistakes that threaten the possibility for people to live happy lives. Things like climate change that you mentioned, that if people in the past had made different decisions, then we would be living in a better world, which is still full of adversity, but gives people more opportunity to pursue, everything that they can, everything that they want out of life.
Now, I don't exactly know where to go from here, but I have a different perspective as well, which is not my perspective, but it can happen. We can have uh, religions which are sort of doomsday religions, or they could be just doomsday cults. And basically, they have it in the scripture that the world is ending at some point, and at the point, they get some sort of salvation, the rapture, whatever you might call it. And it could be in their interest to guide the world to that point so that they would be able to go to heaven or achieve some sort of enlightenment. Basically, if this overpopulation thing would happen, then that would be one step closer to their goal of total destruction, which would, in their mind, save them. So it would seem that they would actually welcome uh, these situations and want to strive for them.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to make this necessarily a debate about religion, but I would, criticize the epistemic grounds for their motivations there. And then I would also criticize them on the basis that it's like a theological accelerationism, that you're basically saying I'm willing to do things that I acknowledge are bad with the presumption that something better will come out of it. But the thing is, you don't know that that's something better will come. So if it doesn't, then you've just done bad things and you have to live with that. So I am critical of that mindset wherever it appears. But, of course, I'm also critical of the religious motivations there. Um,
Well, we can do away with the religious motivation. We can take the situation where we have an existential crisis, and it just happens to be that humanity needs this existential crisis for a complete shift in the way that we think, in the way that we operate. If this was sustainable for forever, we would just be the same for forever. And you want to take the risk so you can change for the better. If you don't have these risks, you will just stay still in the sense that, well, I'm not sure that we are staying still, but we have, I think we have really limited ourselves if we find some perfect environment where we don't have any crises. We need them.
yeah, again, I don't think that we're going to eliminate crises or adversity by concerning ourselves with making better choices and wanting the world to be a better place. Um, So what would you be willing to do or not do in order to preserve adversity?
I guess the I guess I'd be willing to do quite a lot, like create this overpopulation problem. Maybe a lot of people suffer from it, but because of this adversity, we actually strive to go to the stars. We go to other planets because we need more room for our population. We start colonizing Mars. Maybe we go outside of our solar system and colonize other solar systems and so on. And that could actually be the incentive we need to do that. Because imagine if we are sustainable, we can just, there's just no reason to go to these other planets because we have all of the room here on Earth. We can just plug ourselves into these pods where we are connected in virtual reality and we never exit those pods. We stay inside those pods forever, living our dreams, but not actually going out there and doing it for real.
Well, I don't know that one of those is necessarily more valuable than the other. Um, that that it would be better for us to explore the stars in physical reality versus, as you say, plug ourselves into a virtual reality and live out our dreams. Um, I think that could be a wonderful world for a lot of people as well.
Yeah,
Um,
but
but well, go ahead, respond.
yeah, but if I feel like if we take the easy way, we have no reason to do anything else. If life is so easy that you can just plug yourself in, there is no room for discovering actually new things. Like we would never discover real alien races. We would never be able to cooperate. We are just cooperating with some kind of NPC in a computer game. I love computer games, but they do not fully substitute for real life interaction.
Yeah, I mean they can get better, and we can interact with each other in virtual reality as well. But so I want to kind of get back to the point a little bit. So I think it's a false dichotomy as well. It's not like either we, plug ourselves in or we go to the stars. We will probably do both, right? Um, and I don't know also that overpopulation becoming a really big problem more than it is now would guarantee that you know we that we travel the stars. It, as you say, it might motivate us more in that direction, but it could happen anyway, even if overpopulation doesn't become an issue. Maybe it's something that's valuable for its own sake, or maybe just the sheer abundance that would be possible if we could mine resources from space. But then we get to keep our own planet as well, and not have it ruined by overutilization of resources.
Well, it could also make us utilize resources more efficiently. But I still think it's worth the risk. And actually, maybe this isn't a good point against your debate proposition because you could be taking the risk of overpopulating, but still be concerned about the overpopulation. Those aren't mutually exclusive, right?
Yeah, I suppose. Um, so I mean, I wanna question that it's worth the risk. So it's worth the risk of creating an ecological and sociological crisis where millions of people may die of all kinds of horrible ways, for the increased motivation to engage in space travel and colonizing other planets. Like, I don't see these. I don't see that there's like a worth the riskness there. Um, if you catch my drift, and I don't see that there's the guaranteed nature of the result that would warrant taking the risk.
All right, and I guess that might be subjective. We can disagree. We can just agree to disagree, and let the listeners decide for themselves with whom they uh, sympathize more with. Maybe we should move on to some other area. Uh, One thing I am sort of interested in is how much entertainment we can put out. And it would seem that the higher the population we have, the more politics and movies and other media is getting produced for various niche of this population. Not everyone likes certain kinds of movies, but if we have like a big audience, even if you make a movie that only 1% of the population is interested in, then those movies get made more often. And we have these. Sorry, am I fish galloping you? Because I could stop talking and you could just address what I just said.
No, I don't think this is Gish Gallop at this point. I appreciate your point there. So I think that I would kind of take the other side of that and say that we have kind of an oversaturation of media. Now there's so much discussion of like an attention economy, like where do you put your attention and who's trying to grab your attention and why do they want it, and there's all these questions that we're having to engage with more and more. So I can appreciate that certain kinds of media are more obscure, and with a larger population, there would just be like more people, even if it's obscure, so that more things would be able to be possible. But I think there's also other modes of society that would allow obscure things to exist as well, where everything is not necessarily needing to be marketed, where your life doesn't depend on whether your art form can survive in a market economy. Um, so I think that you know more people doesn't necessarily mean better art and better culture. I think that you can kind of argue either way on this, and it's kind of complicated to say.
I mean, you could say that it doesn't necessarily mean that, but it makes it more likely. Do you agree that it
Um,
makes it more likely?
in that particular way, yeah, just by virtue of the number of people who are available to be interested in any given thing. But I think that there are other factors here to be concerned with. So
Right.
just the sheer like amount of stuff that's out there that's going on that's possible to become aware of, is it can be overwhelming, right? Like, how do you even know what it is that you're going to enjoy unless you try it? But then, how do you even know what to try? Um, Infinitely many choices isn't necessarily a good thing.
Personally, I am looking at things and I have very specific interests, and I can see that although there is content to satisfy me, I would like more. And I think that if we had more people, uh, I'm I'm a very curious person. I'm very information hungry. So the situations where you have too much information don't happen to me in today's situation. So I would like more. And actually, it might improve within my lifetime where we have more information that would be of interest to me. So I would actually see that the world population growing might be a good thing in terms of my outlook on life. Uh, of course, I understand that once we get too high, we get this overpopulation, overcrowding. But I'm just looking at my lifespan and what I would want from it.
Hmm. So I think, that's definitely true to a degree. But I think that there's a way where we can go over a threshold and, what was helping becomes a harm. So I think that, the way that the world has developed, having more people has been a good thing for culture. But I think that your argument is assuming that there will be enough resources for this very many people to live a life such that they're able to engage with culture, that they're not, concerned with, let's say, mere survival.
Well, you understand that different places on the planet are going to be different. In China, they don't even have access to the same internet that we do. Yet, uh, these people simply existing uh, improves our lives in the sense that we get cheap products from China. And I see some value coming out of that place, even though I can't even get, I can't even speak Chinese. I have no idea what they're saying, and I'm getting no. I'm not. At least I'm not getting much of their culture or information into my network feed. So whatever they're doing is unfortunately not part of my life, but they are contributing with their population number. And it, it's also like with Africa, they don't all need to have phones, but if some people travel to Europe, or actually some people do have phones, they can still bring me that information that I would crave. Most people probably don't have phones, but that's all right. I can still enjoy their culture to some extent.
Yeah. So I think, again, having more people, at this point, we already have very many people. So, I don't think we need more people in order to grow our culture. And it's not like our population is going to just all of a sudden stop growing. We're going to have some more people at least. But I think having, growth of technology and interconnectedness and having a mode of society that allows people to engage in art forms that may not be marketable, I think those things are really what is going to allow for art and culture to grow
Do
and
you
thrive.
do you know if a society where we have a lowering population is going to produce the same environment or not?
Well, I guess, yeah, this is a good segue to get kind of back to the main point. Um, the number of people is going to influence how many resources that we use, right? Because it's a multiplication problem. How many people you have and how many resources you need per person. So even if you can get really, really efficient on the amount of resources you need per person, it's still going to matter at some point if you have very, very many people.
In Europe, we have the opposite of a growing population. Our population is slowly going lower. So, what we do to fix this problem, because you get economic problems from lowering population, what we do is we import migrants from other places of the world, and that other place could be from Africa, but um, there is you cannot really use this strategy if everywhere in the world you have lowering population, then it would be a worldwide problem. And don't you think that this could have some impact on our economy, which makes our current lives worse?
Yeah, so clearly there are enough people in the world now that, through immigration, we can have the growth that we need in different economies. However, I think that we really need to examine this need for growth that our economies have. Now, I don't have a good understanding of economic theory, so I'm not going to make any strong claims on that. But I just want to say, we live on a finite planet, so infinite growth is just unsustainable. That's a fact. We have to figure out a way to not be so dependent on, this never-ending growth. Um,
I
yeah.
mean, I already proposed that maybe we will go into this infinite growth by colonizing other planets and stars, and maybe it's actually not a problem, but maybe it's a defining it's the defining nature of humanity, and that's what we will be defined as. We will be the colonizers, we will be the explorers, and overpopulators. uh, I don't know that we have actually any future at all if we choose this stagnation where we try to lower population, and it could be devastating. And you say you have no economic knowledge, then I am seriously doubtful that it might be a good idea to stop this overpopulating process, because we have always done this. We have almost never done the opposite, right? So our population is has almost always grown, unless we had some kind of extinction, like an ice age or something like that.
Yeah, so I do want to cite, you know, not literally cite because I don't have the numbers right here in front of me, but I am, to some degree familiar with population growth has been decreasing and is projected to decrease. So that is hopeful. I don't think that that makes it not a concern, but it's not a guarantee that we're going to just grow endlessly. And I think that if we care about our planet, if we care about the environment that we depend on, if we care about each other, if we care about our own lives, if we care about humans being able to live good lives, then we should care about not destroying the planet that we live on. Unless and until we do conquer the stars and have colonies on other planets, unless we eliminate scarcity somehow, we really need to be concerned about not overdoing it. And because, well, I just want to say too, even if we were to eliminate scarcity, I think it's still bad to destroy the environment. We have to balance these things. Sorry, I lost my other point.
Well, as for what you just said, I can see why you are concerned about these things. I'm not as much concerned because I know that we humans, we are, well, I don't want to say smart because that would seem a bit narcissistic, but we find ways to solve problems. And it could be that we need problems. And when we have the problem, let's say that we destroy the environment, we might start looking for solutions like how to create an artificial environment to substitute the one that we destroyed, and that could be like a sustainable one. How to fix the overpopulation problem? Maybe we go to the stars. We have a problem, so we solve it. And if you just uh, take that problem away, I'm not sure how you would force people to stop overpopulating. I suppose you could convince them. That's like another problem, right? But I'm
Hmm.
sure it's realistic to solve. In contrast to making an artificial environment in which we could actually sustain the unsustainable, like overpopulation. Okay, we start building new structures, moving to other planets, and sustain the unsustainable for uh, however long we can. Like the heat of the universe is coming anyway, so we are doomed to be destroyed by some future event. But we could get these problems. And sorry for fish galloping. I'll stop now. You can respond.
Oh, no, you're fine. Yeah, so I mean, I don't think that we should seek to create problems for ourselves to solve. I think that we have sufficient problems that exist naturally. And, one of the sort of issues that I see humanity as having, one of the things that could be our downfall, is that we do have these incredible minds that can create this technology. So we overcome these natural obstacles, but then we assume that we can overcome any obstacle. So then we think, oh, it's okay if we create these problems for ourselves because we'll just solve those problems. It's not a big deal. But we don't know if we can solve every problem. We should um, we should be we should consider ourselves fortunate that we've gotten this far, and we should tread carefully so that we can continue to progress.
I don't think we are just creating these problems for no reason. We are creating them to move forward. Like when we used fossil fuels, it allowed us to basically enter a new era, industrial era, whatever it's called officially. I don't know much about history, but it allowed us to change society dramatically and basically build the future that I live in today. And in some sense, I have to thank these people who exploited nature, destroyed it, exploited resources, made these problems that will happen in my lifetime and in the future. They, thanks to that, I have the current society. If we didn't do that, if we didn't, uh, what's the saying? You have to break a few eggs to make an omelette. If we didn't break
Hmm.
eggs, we we would not have an omelette to begin with. We would have just an empty plate.
Yeah, so I mean, I can agree that, I'm thankful for the people that came before and the things that they accomplished that allowed the things that I appreciate today to be possible. However, I don't know that it's a guarantee that, all the bad choices that were made, all the things that created problems in the past, that if people had made different choices, it it would have excluded the things that we appreciate about today. We could have still maybe had the things that we really like, without some of the bad things. And you'll notice a theme in my arguments. I don't think that two wrongs make a right. I don't think that creating problems with the idea that it may just have a better conclusion is a good idea in general. There has to be a really good justification for it. And I just don't see it in, we'll have more pressure to explore space. We already want to explore space. We already have plenty of motivation to get resources from space. I don't think we need a crisis to spur us into that. But I want to ask you, what means would you adopt to bring about this crisis?
Well, you're asking me uh, if I had like some kind of power or if I'm just the normal person I am today.
Well, I guess I would ask at two layers. What would you prescribe for society to do? What would you say that the powers that be should do? And what would you do just as an individual?
As an individual, I'm not inclined to make more children or anything like that. But well, these processes are sort of out of my personal hand. People are going to uh, make children regardless of what I do, and I'm not I'm not the type of person to say that you don't have the freedom to do something. So you don't have the freedom to make these children. You should stop or something like that. But if I were to make some kind of political legislature or something like that, I would just, the one-child policy in China. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that one was already cancelled. I would, if it wasn't cancelled, then I would allow it, allow people to have more than one children, because that actually caused them some problems. And I'm putting aside my dislikement of the Chinese government. I'm just talking about if I were the ruler of China and I could basically see what I can do to improve people's freedoms. Does that answer your question?
Maybe it sounds like there's not much that you would do. That you would just sort of allow
That's right.
things to go on as they are, rather than do something actively.
Yeah, because I don't seem to have a reason to actively stop people from multiplying, let's say it that way. If they
Mm-hmm.
want to multiply, then they can go ahead, and it's actually good for the economy. It's good for their freedom that they have this freedom to do what they want. And who am I to stop that? Even if I'm like the dictator of some country, I don't think it would be beneficial for society to just start stagnating. It's going to lead to a lot more immediate problems rather than problems in the next 100 years.
Yeah. So I want to say I share your disdain for authoritarianism. I'm not looking to control people's lives or decisions, but I still would not hesitate to say if I think something is a bad decision, and I think that having a lot of children is irresponsible both to your own children and for the planet.
Wait, so what would you do? So I'm asking you the question you asked me.
Hmm. So I think that there might be some threshold that the situation is so dire that I would support something like a one-child policy. But I think that that would have to be extreme, and we're not even close to that. Um, I I would encourage cultural change. Um, I I think that people should be really careful about deciding whether to have children. It's not for everyone. It's a huge responsibility. It will affect the rest of your life. Um, so that's for one thing. Um, and then another thing is the birth rate in countries with a higher standard of living is lower, and family sizes are lower. So I think that this is just coinciding with another goal that I have of I want everybody to have the best quality of life that's possible for them to have. And so if we raise the standard of living in in countries where it's not very good and where family sizes are higher, uh, then we may have as two birds, one stone.
Yeah,
Similarly, similarly, economic stability, um, empowerment of women, access to birth control, contraception, abortion. I think that these are also very important and also coincide with lower family sizes, and also something we both seem to care about: freedom.
yeah. Um, I suppose it would solve the overpopulation issue if we just made every country in the world a first world country. But it's a little bit more complex than that because these first world countries rely on exploiting other countries. Like most of, uh, well, you know that the colonization has more or less ended. But if you really look at what's going on, a lot of African countries are still paying money to France or using their currency, or the USA is still going to these other countries and taking their resources, uh, and a lot of Africa is using currency. Did I already say this? Currency of other countries, so they don't have their own currency and they are sort of reliant. And it is done kind of artificially. You have these agreements, you have this political influence, and so on. I have not seen that you could actually have a first world system where there are no third world countries to exploit. So if we try to push everyone up, then there will be no one on whose shoulders to stand on. So everyone is in the air. They're standing on nothing, and then they fall to the ground. That would be like a quick analogy I made up. Right now, we are standing on the shoulders of other countries. If we are like the first world countries, uh, you could take some first world countries that aren't doing that, but they're like in a huge union like the European Union, in which they actually, I think, still stand on the shoulders just using some other country like France, or I struggle to find examples here, but something like this is going on where we are exploiting the third world, but we cannot really be rich. We cannot be the first world country if we don't do that. If the United States stops doing what they do, they lose the dollar as the number one currency. Everyone is using the dollar, but if they lose their influence in Africa or in the Middle East, where all of this oil is based on these oil barrels are based on the dollar, then they lose influence. They might actually become a third world country or something like that. It's hard to imagine, but they would significantly downgrade if they didn't have those third world countries.
Mm-hmm. So I definitely see what you're saying, and I think it's totally unjust and immoral, the exploitation that so-called first world countries are engaging in. Um, so I think that the problem is maybe with the concept of a first world country. The very idea of it being first means that something else isn't first. You know, and again, I don't want to make this a debate about economics, um, but clearly, there are enough resources. So it seems like a matter of willingness or, logistics of just how we want to get the resources to the people that need them, you know. So that the economic system that we have that is distributing resources unequitably is not a requirement, right? We can do things some other way.
I'm not sure that I would like that some other way. Like I can see that hundreds of years into the future, we are so amazing that we can actually pull it off. But right now, we kind of need those things. Like maybe you can even forget about going to space if you want to do this. If the USA is not no longer powerful, or I don't, I'm not sure because this is a complex topic, but you might be hindering our progress, is what I'm suspecting.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you mean by progress. I think progress would mean improving the quality of life for as many people as we can, right? And it doesn't seem like um, that is very connected to a lot of people's notion of progress these days, at least people in power. So maybe that's something we disagree on, but that seems to be more of an economic issue. So maybe we can get a little bit back to the debate topic.
All right. So, uh, do you want to take it in some kind of other direction than the one I took it right now?
Um, yeah, sure. So basically, I want to frame this in terms of just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? So there are projections where, we're doing multiplication, right? We're saying there are so many resources available. We're projected to have so many resources with the growth of technology and so on. And because, a person needs this much resources to be alive, then we can support, however many billions of people. Um, however many more billions of people. So just because we can doesn't mean it's a good idea. I think that we would be better off with a lower number of people. Um, there's this idea of like this hellscape where there's just so many people you can't move 1 foot in either direction, and there's barely enough to keep people alive. That's not really what I'm trying to talk about. I mean, yeah, that is possible, and I think we definitely want to avoid that. But I think we would agree that's probably not very likely. So, I mean, still, it's a gradient, as I pointed out in the beginning. We want to avoid anything close to that, anything in the direction of that. The fewer people we have, the more leeway we have, the more opportunity we can provide to each person that's alive. And if we don't want people to be killed in the future unnecessarily, we need to be proactive. The choices that the people alive today make are the ones that matters, because every additional person that's born locks us in for another 70 or so years of resource consumption, plus their children and their children's children, and so on and so on. So, we just need to be concerned about risk management. Even if we can actually support a large number of people at a particular point in time, circumstances could change. Let's say technology develops, we get really, really efficient, where we hardly need any resources to keep a person alive and even for them to have a good quality of life. Well, what if there's some crisis where we can't use technology the same way anymore? And then all of a sudden we've got all these people we can't support. Then all of a sudden we're much closer than we thought to that hellscape I referenced. The larger the number of people, the greater the difficulty of dealing with a rise in scarcity.
See, I don't think we will ever reach that hellscape in some places. This goes back to the first world, third world country. So in first world countries, we are going to have less people. In third world countries, you might have a sort of a hellscape, but they are limited by their food. So I guess the overpopulation definition, where we are supporting basically as many people as much as resources we have, and we can't support anymore. I'm not convinced that that extreme situation would actually give us this hellscape situation where you can't step one foot in front because there's so many people everywhere, and you can't even move around. You had more points, but I feel like I feel like you went through a lot of them. Can you give me the second point you were making?
About how, once people are born, then we're locked in, so we have to be proactive. That one.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it, but it could just be not an issue. Like, yes, we are locked into 70 years of consumption, but I think that as our resources change, our consumption is also going to change. Like, we are looking at oil resources, and they are eventually going to dwindle. We are already looking at, hey, we can't do this forever. We have alternatives, even though we have like many years of oil left. We already got these electric cars and whatever. So it's not going to be like this comes out of nowhere, and suddenly this resources just disappears of the earth. I'm guessing that we will actively try and see if we can develop alternatives way before we even get to the point where, oh, our whole system, which depended on this resource, now cannot work because suddenly the resource is it's gone.
Yeah. So, I mean, not to be too doomer about things, but we may already be headed down not a great path here in terms of our climate and what's possible in the future. So, like you're saying, there's enough oil for us to continue using it for years. But if we continue using it, then we're going to increase the level of difficulty in the future. We're going to decrease our ability to support people on this planet. We're going to decrease the ability of the planet to sustain itself through its own processes, the ecosystems that once thrived.
I feel like this is going to go back to near the start of the debate where I'd say, oh, if we destroy this natural area, then we will eventually have a motivation to create some kind of artificial environment, artificial ecology in that area. We sort of do that already, but we could do it in a smarter way.
Yeah. Sorry, could you repeat that last point?
I'm saying we already create artificial environments, but uh, I think we could do it in a smarter way. Like if we cut down a forest and make some grassland in there and have cows eating the grass, that's actually something they advocate for. That oh, the way to restore these areas is by starting a grassland in there and putting those cows in there, and the cows eat the grass and it becomes like a small ecology or something like that. I'm not convinced that it's a proper replacement for something like wildlife where you have a forest or swamp or whatever you used to have there. But maybe we can maybe we can find something better. Maybe we can evolve that method and create an actually sustainable environment.
Yeah. So I think, definitely it's better if we can get something good out of it or create something good out of it rather than just, destroy it and leave it or whatever. But I think, there's still something to be said for not destroying it in the first place. I think that that would be ideal. And the less people we have, the less motivations that we're going to have to destroy additional things.
So
So
you,
I would grant that as long as we're existing, we're going to have a need to destroy some things to continue to exist. But if we have too many of us, then we're going to need to destroy more things, and then we're going to run out of things to destroy at some point.
I mean, I sort of see us as destroyers and possibly rebuilders. Like if you go to another star system and you find a planet and you look at this planet, it has some life, but it's like really toxic to humans. We sort of need an environment that we create. There's there isn't really an environment in nature that we can thrive in. Like you can go live in a cave, but what we do as humanity is go in, destroy, and rebuild. Like a wooden house, you destroy the wood, you build a house from wood, and I just don't see why this would be like inherently bad. It's part of what we do. It's like a strategy that works very well. Actually, you could you are probably making the case that we are getting overboard with it, but I would like to explore that more. So to see that if we can actually rebuild, well, we are very good at destroying, but I would question if we are good at rebuilding. And I think we need some real incentive at rebuilding, not just sustaining some wildlife next to our house.
Yeah, I don't think it's just wildlife next to our house or something like that. I think it's, um, the Earth functions as a system, that there are so many different habitats, so many different interdependencies, that even people who study this don't understand everything. We learn new things all the time, and still there's so much more to learn.
And
I don't think that I think that humans are engaging in an extreme level of hubris to think that we can know so much, to think that we have the right to dominate over all of nature. I think that, we have a right to exist. I think that we can take what we need, but we're doing way more than that. And we need to figure out how to cut down, if not for our own sake, for the sake of the environment that made our own existence possible.
this has gone for quite a long time. Do you want to move on to closing statements?
Yeah, if you like, we can do that.
All right. So, would you go first, or do you think I should?
Um, do you have a preference?
Not really.
Okay, I guess I can go first. Um, so I think overpopulation is something that we should be concerned with, because overpopulation just means that we don't have enough resources, um, for everyone to live a good life or to survive. And there are different factors which contribute to that. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought a little bit. Lovely for that to happen in the closing statement. Um, so carrying capacity is a fuzzy line, and if we care about humanity, if we care about creating a better world, if we care about people having good lives, then we should take into account that the more people there are, the more resources we're going to need. The less there will be to go around, the less that we'll have for each person. So if we want people to have a good life, then we should have less people. And that doesn't mean killing people. In fact, I would like to avoid that at all costs. So I think that we need to be proactive and just have less people before they exist.
All right. Thank you for that summary. Now, here is mine. I think that overpopulation is a helpful problem for humanity because humans are essentially terraformers. We take some piece of land, we destroy any wildlife on it, we change it, and we rebuild an environment that is suitable for us. And once we reach the limit in our population, uh, we will solve it like any other problem we have met. And I didn't really say this in the debate, but if we are unable to solve it, then uh, maybe we aren't really worthy to travel to the stars. Once we travel to the stars, we can solve overpopulation. We can populate new planets. We can uh, destroy the environment, even if it's just some kind of rock planet like Mars. We can take what is inside there, some resources. We can build off of that, and we can expand possibly to other stars and planets in those star systems. So I would really say that I'm not so concerned about this overpopulation as I am about whether we can prove that we can overcome this challenge. And it is the challenge that which is what I would be focused on, not that we have these problems, but that we can find challenges to these problems.